Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we have an honor to invite one of the best experts in the nation to give us a program about some unique cacti of the Cochise County, or Cochise County of Arizona. Thank you. So I would like to have Rob, our speaker, to introduce himself because if I were to introduce him, I would say, oh, this guy, he's an expert and he has been doing this for his entire life. Whenever I have a cactus question, I will go to him and he can give me the answer right away. And some of you ask me, why am I getting so good of identifying all these plants? Well, because of Rob. So yes, he's my cactus friend to go to whenever I have questions. So please welcome Rob, and he's going to give us such a wonderful program tonight. And Rob.
Thank you, Echo. Thank you, Houston Cactus and Succulent Society, for having me this evening. I'll try to keep people from falling asleep.
I think the volume is really low. Let me try to turn it up.
How's that?
No, it doesn't work. Hold on. Somehow the speaker is turned off. Now, can you try again?
Yes. How's that?
Yay.
That's better? Okay.
Yes, that's
Once
perfect.
again, thank you, Echo, and thank you, HCSS, for having me this evening. As she said, my name is Rob Romero. I'm a longtime cactus hobbyist. Expert, I don't know about that. I've had a lot of trial and error and about 32 years worth of playing around with plants. I'm not a trained botanist by any means, but I enjoy the plants and I enjoy the hobby, and I enjoy, meeting a lot of really interesting people, and it's been fun to get to know Echo, and I would hope to come to Houston sometime to meet more of you folks. So I will try to not put anybody to sleep this evening. So what I want to do is take you on a little tour of a small portion of Arizona in the southeast corner of the state, Cochise County. When people think of Arizona, right away, the first thing you think of when you think of cactus in Arizona is the saguaro, which covers a large chunk of the state. However, there is a portion of Arizona in the southeast portion where the Chihuahuan Desert actually comes into the state. So where is Cochise County? We're down here in the southeast corner. When you think of saguaros, it's pretty much a lot of this area here, which is the Sonoran Desert. A few facts about Cochise County. It's part of what's known as the Basin and Range Province. That's an area across the southern part of Arizona and New Mexico where you have wide expanses of flat land with singular mountain ranges interspersed in that vicinity. You've got 14 total mountain ranges in Cochise County. And as I mentioned, part of that county is within the Chihuahuan Desert. One of the other unique things about this county is some of these plants are only found here within the state of Arizona. And more importantly, if you're a cactus nut like I am, who likes to go wander around the desert staring at the ground, there is a lot of places to go look at plants there. So here's where we were talking about the Chihuahuan Desert in Arizona. This right side map kind of shows you, it kind of trickles in kind of close to Arizona, but it's mostly down in this southeast corner. It covers parts of Cochise County and parts of Greenlee County. This is a more simplified kind of map, kind of showing you other portions of deserts that are within Arizona. So the plants that we're going to be talking about this evening that I'll be showing you, these are all ones that are unique to Cochise County. I won't read every one of them. Hopefully you can see them clearly enough on the screen here. One of the rarest ones is Escobaria robinsorum. It's literally found just on 2 hills within the county. Epithalanthum micromeris is another one that's highly localized, but as you go to the east, it becomes more and more numerous in areas of southern New Mexico and the Trans-Pecos of Texas. It's been thought of as a relic island population that got isolated as climate changed, over the many thousands and thousands of years. So the first one we'll talk about is Epithalanthum micromeris. One of the common names is a button cactus. It's pretty common in cultivation. It's a fairly easy plant to grow. I know you folks in Houston have your challenges with heat and constant humidity and tons of rain, but if you have a greenhouse, you do have an edge to be able to grow some of these interesting plants. I know Echo grows a lot of Epithalanthum micromeris. She may have brought some to your show and sale. They're commonly, you can easily find them in the trade, and they're fun to grow from seed as well. As I had said, this one is kind of an island population. The closest population that I'm aware of is in Lake Valley, New Mexico, which is around about 200 miles to the east. And there's literally no plants that I have ever found or that I've ever heard records of in between those two places. So that's what you see when you look at these guys in nature. A big plant is the size of a golf ball, maybe a little bit larger. They will get larger than that in cultivation, but typically in habitat, they don't get too big. Generally because they grow in a dry climate where you've got less than 12 inches of rainfall on an annual basis. You'll note the little red fruits poking out of the top of the plant. It is the only member of the genus Epithalantha that is self-fertile. So if you have one plant, you will be able to make an ongoing supply of seeds. Now, each of those little fruits does not contain many seeds, but the beauty of this plant is that they flower for several months in the late winter, early spring, and then you will see just a constant flow of these little fruits all the way into the fall months. Beautiful little plants, very densely covered with spines. They typically grow almost exclusively on limestone. You'll note the limestone substrate here. This is likely 3 individual plants. They are not known to be heavy clumpers like other members of the cactus family. However, if a stem were to get damaged, they will offset from below the point of where the damage might be. Again, on the plant on the right, you'll see more fruits kind of popping up. The flower is not a whole lot to look at. In fact, it's hard to see the flower when they open. It's a tiny thing, maybe an 1/8 of an inch wide at the most, and it's just a very, very pale pink and does not protrude above the top of the wool that you see at the apex of the plant. This particular population, being so isolated, you find a lot of crested plants where normally crested plants are not that common in wild populations, but it's speculated that because this population can have some inbreeding amongst individuals over a lengthy period of time, that can cause the mutation. It's verifiable information or not. I don't have anything beyond that. This plant, it looks large, and it was maybe about 3 inches long. On one of my subsequent trips to go look at this plant, it had perished. Are you guys seeing that message on my screen? No, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, there's another picture of it. It was a beautiful crest while it was alive. Sadly, it was deceased. We found the dried up shell of it on one of the last trips a few years ago. Disney will pop up in a population occasionally. We call this the Mickey Mouse epithelantha. I showed this picture to Echo, and she also commented that it looked like a teddy bear. So you can, draw your own conclusion there. Kind of a broad overview of what you'll see in nature. These plants are growing at about 5,500 feet of elevation, and it's fairly steep terrain. Many of the plants will be in situations like you see. You'll note the plant right here kind of hiding in the crack there. Some of this terrain is so rocky that you'll see water flow during thunderstorms. And there was a section of this habitat where all the individual plants, about a dozen or so, all got washed away in a flash flood. They can be a challenge to find because the color of the plant blends in with the color of the surrounding limestone. These probably a little bit more easy for you guys to see because I did kind of situate them straight away in the center of the photo. But this kind of gives you an idea as from from normal walking height as you're staring at the ground looking for plants. This is kind of, you're looking for these little round balls amongst all of this cobbly limestone. So we'll move on to Escobaria robinsorum. This one is federally listed as threatened. As I said, it's only found on a couple of hills and is endemic to Arizona. There has been some reports from folks that I know in the border area of Mexico, right to the south of this habitat, that they have found them, but I have never seen any verified reports. So we still consider it to be just endemic to Arizona. It is exclusively a limestone dweller. It's a strange habitat. It's a lot of mixed geology, and these, I'll show you a picture of the habitat here momentarily. It's a small population, but there's a lot of plants where they grow. So they're not rare when you get onto the hill, but they are very, very narrowly distributed. A beautiful plant to grow. I suspect you could grow these in Houston if you could keep them on the dry side in a greenhouse. They're very easy to grow from seed, and you can get them up to flowering size in about 2 years from seed. And that's what you see when you get up close to one in nature. That plant was about the size of a nickel. They will flower at about dime size, so they do not have to be big plants to produce flowers. That one has a fruit that is starting to ripen, so later on there would be some small seeds to be had there. That's kind of an idea of the habitat there. There's some other plants that occur there. Ocotillos are quite numerous. They are very, very common on the hill. You've got agave palmeri, which is another common plant of the region, not necessarily unique to Cochise County. So I'll have a list of some of the plants that are also around, but not unique to that county. Lots of prickly pears, as one might expect. And then there's some other cacti in the region as well. A couple of human beings staring at the ground. That's what you do. You develop back problems later in life when you're a field trip guy. They are generally found a lot in the cracks in limestone. Seed will kind of get lodged down in or washed down into cracks, and with enough shade in those little cracks and some enhanced moisture and humidity, then of course the seed will germinate, and with any luck and conditions being right, you'll get a plant up to maturity. So when they flower, not the most spectacular flower, but pretty in its own right. For such a tiny plant, it's got just a gorgeous little flower. You can catch these in usually around mid-April. It's not super hot, so it's quite enjoyable to be hiking around and taking a look at them. It is all on public land, so there's no trespassing or any other nefarious behavior needed to be able to see these plants. Most of the time when you go to the habitat, rarely do you see other people. The most common people that stop and ask you what you're doing are the Border Patrol, and they're generally pretty friendly folks and just kind of making sure you're safe. This one likely got some damage. And so consequently, as it's gotten larger, it has offset. I think it really produced a gorgeous plant here. Seems to have enhanced spination on the stem, but this whole individual was maybe 1.5 inches across. So you really have to get a feel for just how tiny some of these plants are. Often overlooked when they're overshadowed by the iconic saguaro that everybody wants to stand next to. Kind of a ground level shot here. They grow with lots of little mosses and other things that I'm afraid I can't tell you the name of, but this was an exceptionally large individual, maybe almost golf ball size, which is really, really rare for this plant. They do hide quite a bit. This was in the pre-flowering season. In the wintertime, what they will do as they kind of prepare for the cold weather, it does get quite cold at this habitat with many nights below freezing. They will get rid of the excess moisture in the tissue and kind of shrink down and withdraw into these cracks so they have protection, from freeze and from cold wind and so forth.
Rob, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Yes. So what is the typical winter humidity of the habitat?
Typical winter humidity, it's a very dry area. On any average day, you're barely going to get into the 10 to 15% range. Oftentimes it can be in single digit humidity at this place. So it does get, it is very dry. This part of Arizona is less than 10 inches of rainfall per year on average. So it is incredibly dry. These plants will thrive on some winter moisture in the late winter, where the ground will stay damp, and as the plants wake up, they have available moisture to take up. But then they will get heavy downpours from monsoonal moisture here as well. So they've got kind of a 2-cycle rainfall period that they thrive on.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, here's a shot. So when you're standing up, staring at the ground, this is kind of what you want to, it's hard to pick out these plants, but you start to get a picture in your mind. And as you keep moving along, you find more and more of them. A little bit closer up of the flower here. Pardon the less than perfect clarity on that picture. Another Escobaria that is restricted just to this part of Arizona, but then moves on over into other parts of New Mexico is Escobaria orcudii, only found in just a few limestone exposures around Portal, Arizona. And another medium elevation plant. These guys are a little bit below 5,000 feet. They have a pale pink flower. Sadly, I have never been to see them in flower, so I will apologize in advance for not having a picture of those flowers. It is a really rough terrain when you try to go see these plants. Whereas the Robinsorum is a little more open terrain. Now, not only do you have ocotillo and agave, you have got whitethorn acacia in here as well. And if anybody's ever been out into the western part of Texas and gotten tangled up in that stuff, you'll know that it likes to bite and it likes to hold on to your skin. And this is very steep terrain too. So it's one of those, kind of precarious places to go look at cacti. They are more of a clumper now, and they're quite a bit bigger than the previous Escobaria. These were in kind of a dry period, so they're not the most pretty plants to look at. They actually don't get a whole lot more attractive than this. They're kind of a rough snowball of sorts with kind of white spines with darker tips. They like to hide in big grass clumps and under shrubs and such. So that's where it's kind of a challenge to wade through all of the underbrush to find them. Gives you an idea of kind of their very dense spination. A decent plant to grow. They're really easy, fairly common in the trade. Seeds are pretty much readily available from most seed sources. They are, being a clumper, they can be a fairly long-lived plant. What you'll notice here is here. All of this was part of this individual at one point and has since died, whereas these other stems will take root as they move along. So if one part of the clump dies, it doesn't take the rest of it with it. But this is pretty typical growth habit for them. Give you an idea of the size. I showed this picture to Echo, and she asked if that was my lip balm. I said no, that was with one of the people I was traveling with that day. But so a little prettier plant there. You can see flower buds getting ready to emerge, but we were quite a bit too early. These wouldn't have opened for probably the better part of another week or so. This individual had these nice kind of dark tips on the spines, which made it a little bit more attractive. But you can see there another similar kind of crack dwelling plant on this hard limestone. One of my favorites that occur in that area is Coryphantha robusta-spina subspecies uncinata. Again, it's another one that is only found in this county, but spreads west through southern New Mexico and into West Texas. It's 1/3 of the robusta spina complex and is the one that has the most widespread distribution. It's related to Arpima pineapple. I spent 25 years in Tucson, Arizona, recently moved back to New Mexico, but the Pima pineapple was quite a controversial plant in Arizona because it's a federally endangered listed plant. So anytime there was development where those plants were present, there was a whole lot of red tape that developers had to wade through. But gladly or fortunately, a lot of the plants were mitigated off-site by botanists, and large efforts were made to preserve them. These plants grow really close and hug the New Mexico state line on the eastern side of Cochise County. They grow in very typical Chihuahuan desert. This section of the county is really solid Chihuahuan desert, dominated by creosote bush, a lot of flat ground, lots of prickly pear around. And if you look closely, you'll see right here is one of the coryphanthas. Right here is one of the coryphanthas. They're a little easier to see because they can get fairly large. An average plant is anywhere around like an average sized grapefruit, but they can get larger than that as well. I think they're just gorgeous plants. These were kind of in a dry spell, so they were a little bit shrunk down. They do like a deeper sandy soil. There's a lot of rock here, but it's not hard rock. There's not like a rock substrate underneath, so they have a lot of root room here. They will occasionally offset. You don't see this often, but it does happen. It's another one that is not terribly difficult to grow. They do take a few years to get flowers from seed, but they do make an attractive plant in their own right. These really pronounced bright green tubercles and lots of spines. They're generally a few and far between kind of distribution. They're not rare, they just don't grow in dense colonies. You'll see a plant, occasionally plants will be close together, but generally you'll see a plant and then, 50, 100 yards away, you might find another one. So they don't ever seem to stay close together. Why, I could not tell you. This was the largest one I'd ever seen at this habitat, and that was pushing a foot tall and about 8 inches in diameter. There was a serious drought back in the 2016, 2018 period in this part of Arizona. And as I had visited this habitat on occasions, I was just mortified to find that this plant, all that was left of it was a stump that had been chewed down to the ground, and the plant had been consumed by jackrabbits. They were seeking out the moisture in the plant, and all that was left, and I did not get a picture of that, but all that was left was just this bare stump of the plant at ground level. I was shocked that a rabbit could actually do that. There's a chance that it could have been javelina as well, but there was not the same amount of destruction around the plant that you would see if a javelina had tried to dig it up and eat it. This was one of the largest clumps that was there. This is pushing about 18 inches across. I just find them to be just beautiful, beautiful plants. Kind of a ground level shot. Here's your basin and range kind of habitat where you've got lots and lots of square miles of flat area with isolated mountain ranges kind of interspersed. Another Where's Waldo kind of picture here where you can kind of pick them out. Here's one, here's one, here's one here. And it's just kind of wandering around. The crazy thing about this habitat that some folks have said, you're nuts. Right over here is the westbound side of Interstate 10. Right here is the eastbound side of Interstate 10. So you can surmise that I am in between lanes of traffic in Interstate 10. The nice thing is it's a huge area in between the lanes of traffic. So you can park, and fortunately the traffic's pretty interspersed out here. So you can quickly hightail it across the 2 lanes of traffic, and no one seems to care that you can hike around in the middle here. But I showed this photo to some people and they said, you are crazy, you will do the weirdest stuff to go look at cactus. I said, yes, I will. Another narrow endemic in Arizona that runs down into Mexico is a kind of series Pseudopectinatus. It's just a gorgeous plant, as you will see. Unlike the previous plants that I've showed you, this one is mostly confined to igneous soils, mostly rhyolite in the case of the area it grows here. You'll notice some commonality here with the elevation. A lot of Cochise County is in the 4,000 to 5,000 foot elevation range. It's a small little, as the kind of series go, it's, the hedgehog group, as is commonly known. These guys really like to grow in the rocky slopes. Fortunately, not real steep, so it's easy to kind of scramble up the hills to go see them, but they're not huge. This plant was maybe 5 inches tall. Lots and lots of other things around. When you go in the spring, it's also a big wildflower area, so you've got a whole lot of really wonderful scenery. Again, like a lot of the plants of the region, they like to grow in the cracks. It's on they're generally confined to a south-facing hillside, so they can maximize the amount of heat that they can endure or that they can use in winter months when it's cold. You'll see an adult plant here, and then you'll see the remnants of an adult plant here. And what you've got here are young seedling volunteers that have come up at the base of their parent plant. And this is a fairly common situation with some of the Echinocerius, where seeds will get dropped by ants or other critters as the fruit gets consumed. And as they drop into the cracks, you'll have some moisture and some humidity, and the plants will get going. Another one that's easy to grow. And when you're down there in the kind of the mid to late summer, if they've had a good flowering season, you'll see lots of big fat fruits around, and you'll see this plant is really plump. They've had lots of rain. You can see how green it is around here. All the grasses are green and the trees and such. They just have a very neat, compact appearance to them. I've grown these for a few years, and they're unfussy in cultivation. Again, for you guys in Houston, it would just be a matter of, keeping them on the drier side. First images of flower buds coming. They start out with a woolly flower bud, and then that ends up elongating, and then that's what you get. They have a exceptionally large flower for the size of the stem. This is a plant in my collection, and the stem on this plant was maybe 3 inches tall by 1.5 inches across. So it gives you if you can kind of imagine the scale there, you see just how wonderfully large and gorgeous that flower is. And they make lots of seeds. So if you get 2 plants together, you'll have more seeds than you'll ever need to grow. It's another one that's easy to find seed of in the trade. Mesa Garden Nursery here in Belen, largest domestic seed source in the world for us, sells seed of this particular species. One of the more challenging plants to grow is Echinomastix intertextus. And this one is one that then starts in Arizona, skips across in parts of southern Mexico, but then reappears in the Davis Mountains between Marfa and Fort Davis in Texas. I have yet to see the Texas plants, but I was excited to finally find the Arizona plants quite a few years ago. Gorgeous things. They just have, again, they have that real tidy appearance. The spines are very pectinate. They hug the plant. You can literally, put your hand around central spines, which are maybe 2 millimeters long. They are not a bitey cactus like, you find in other genera and other species. They grow on deep limestone soils in a couple of places across from Sonoyta, Arizona, all the way across towards north of Douglas, kind of a little strip of area there. That's typical habitat. This is an area in the Swiss Helm Mountains. Lots of grassland in this area. It's a little bit more grassy than some of the harder desert areas, some creosotes around and so forth. And they're another one that, when it's been a good monsoon year, the grass grows really tall in this area, relatively speaking, that is. And they kind of hide down in amongst the rocks. And so it's a little bit of a Easter egg hunt. Occasionally they'll do stuff like this. This plant has no perceivable damage to the stem, but just decided to create a little offset. Makes for kind of a unique looking plant. This was in, as I said, this was in a really good monsoon summer. So it's just, the soil was nice and damp. It was just green, green, green. And the plants looked like they were just about ready to pop. And they can get pretty big. Well, big is kind of a relative term in the world of cactus when you're looking at smaller stuff. But, you know, there's a lens cover. So that kind of gives you an idea of what size this one was. What was unique about this plant is see how the ribs are spiraling. When you saw this plant from overhead, it looked like it had a twist to it. Sadly, this plant got eaten by insects and is no longer at that habitat. So they do have their cycle of life. They're a early spring or late winter, early spring flowering plant. And they will flower when it's still freezing at night, which is unusual. There are some other southwestern U.S. plants that do that, some that occur in Texas as well in the Trans-Pecos. But that's what you get when they flower. Just these little kind of creamy white flowers about midday. In some individuals, not sad, they will have the stigma lobes will be just this bright hot pink color. And you'll see that in about half of the individuals that you look at. A tough plant in cultivation. They do not like excess moisture. They have a very fragile root system. What's crazy about that to me is that when you find them in nature, you can find populations with hundreds of plants that just seem to be as happy as they can be, but yet you try to grow them in a pot and they just almost want to die. Sadly, there's a lot of really cool cactus that are like that. And your climate in Houston would make it almost impossible to grow these without grafting them. Which would almost be, mandatory to keep them alive. Another one of my favorites, which is a really strange part of or member of the cactus world, is Peniocereus greggii, subspecies greggii. There's two subspecies of this plant found in Arizona. They do both occur in Cochise County, but this is the subspecies greggii is only found in Cochise County. Known as a queen of the night, they're a very popular plant in southern Arizona. It was a real treat when you could get your hands on one. When I get to some flower pictures, you'll see why. They aren't the prettiest thing to look at when they're not in flower, but I find them to be incredibly fascinating. That's what you're looking for, is these stems that arise under shrubs or within the shade of small mesquite trees and so forth, and they need the cover of a nurse plant to support the branches. The branches get long and spindly, and if they don't have any support, they will actually then fall over and break under their own weight. So when you're kind of out working in the field, you want to focus your eyes under little thickets of mesquite and so forth, and you're trying to find something that looks mostly exactly like the branches of the mesquite bush. So if you'll notice here, this is a stem of a Peniocereus, and if you look right next to it, that is the branch of the mesquite tree. So they are really camouflaged. And in a lot of cases, they can occur in large numbers. You just don't see them. They are masters of concealing themselves in the undergrowth. They can get really ugly, for just to be quite brutally honest about it. They get old and weathered. The stems will start to bark up down below, or they'll get chewed, or they'll die back. Fortunately, this one had a new stem coming up from another portion of it. What's interesting about these plants is underneath the ground is a really large tuberous root. When I was in Tucson, we had a rescue program where we would go to construction sites and salvage, all the plants that we could. And in some cases, there was a number of the other subspecies of this plant that we would find. And we dug up a tuber one time that I was involved with that weighed 45 pounds. And they can get larger than that. They are a long-lived plant. They rival saguaros in terms of longevity and life. That tuber underground can sit dry for many, many months. And what they will do is allow the top stems to completely just die back. And they just kind of sit idle in the ground waiting for the right conditions to send up new growth. The new growth on it is quite fast. I grew some of these in a pot, and they will put on 2 feet of stem growth in a season. So when you kind of relate that to a cactus, that is just super speedy growth. Again, when they're not flowering, you look at that and go, wow, is that not one of the ugliest things I have ever laid my eyes upon? This gives you an idea of how over time what they'll do is branches will die back. This is all new growth here, and this is all old growth that probably died during a drought period or froze back, so forth. They do have a small woody core, but if they get too tall, as I said, they will break under their own weight. Another example of a really old weathered specimen there. You can see the hints of flower buds starting. Occasionally you find individuals that aren't growing under support plants, and every time you find them in that situation, they are never very tall. I think this particular guy was maybe about 18 inches tall, because as the stem gets too big, it flops over and breaks off. When they do have sufficient support, the branches can approach 6 to 8 feet in height if the tree is tall enough. See one there, and there's kind of one sticking up out the backside there. This is the Whetstone Mountains near Benson, Arizona. It's an odd place because there's a lot of Peniocereus growing outside in just open ground, not under bushes. This is the fruits. When you see them in fruit, then they become a whole lot easier to find, because that fruit is can be a little bit bigger than a golf ball, and will fit in the palm of your hand. And they really are a big flashing light going, look at me, here I am, here I am. There's nothing tasty about this fruit at all. You look at that and you think, wow, that would probably be delicious, bright red fruit. It's got lots of flesh inside, but they are almost tasteless. You rarely see any vertebrate critters like squirrels or rabbits or anything eat these things. When I grew these at my house, the only thing that would actually come to these fruits was birds, and they would peck into the fruit wall here to get to the seeds. They had no interest in anything else other than the seeds. Now, they are packed with seeds. There could be 200 or more seeds just in this one fruit. Just a quick comparison between, this is subspecies Greggii and this is subspecies transmontanus, which is the much wider distributed member of the group in Arizona that covers much of the lower half of the state and into Mexico. And you'll notice that, the areoles and the spines are much closer here, and you've got that line of wool between the areoles where this is a very clean stem and the spines project more away from the stem. When they flower, you look at this little tiny stem and look at how long the floral tube is. for what's going to happen here. And they're a night bloomer. And on the day that they start to flower, you'll notice the bud starts to look like it's inflating. And this is getting close to sundown. And you'll see the bud start to get fatter. Here's more earlier in the day. On a different plant, you see it kind of getting fatter. And then as it gets darker, it starts to unfurl, and this is what you end up with. These flowers are about 4 inches across, and they are unbelievably fragrant. If you've got enough flowers going at the same time, you can smell them from about 10 feet away. They're just wonderfully fragrant. They're mostly moth pollinated. You see a lot of hawk moths on these guys. My plants in the yard were rob pollinated, so I could ensure that I would get lots of fruits out. I have a very specialized pollinator, but just amazing flowers. Lots of spread in the pollen, so any of the creatures that can get to them. Occasionally bats will get in there as well, and they'll rub their face around in there. And then there's your stigma lobe. So as you're carrying pollen around, the stigmas are very pronounced and protrude out from the flower to maximize pollination. These are some of my oldest plants in Tucson. I left them all there. Actually, they went to a friend of mine. But I had large plants that would have as many as 16 to 20 flowers open at one time on one single plant. And it was just a real treat. Several of my neighbors would always tell me, "Hey, Rob, make sure you let us know when your queens are going to bloom." And it was quite a neighborhood event. So that's it for the unique plants. In addition to the unique plants, it is a very rich area for other cacti and other succulents. Kind of just give you a quick rundown. You've got 3 different agave species that grow there. It's really rich in hedgehog, Echinocerius. Lots of different species there. This is kind of an interesting one. It just covers several other counties.
Can you say that 3 times fast?
I'll let you try to say that 3 times fast.
You're trying to kill me here. Yeah.
And the list goes on. Quite a variety of genera. Covers a lot of the different groups of plants. I'm trying to entice everybody to go visit this part of Arizona, because I think if you have any interest in seeing plants in nature, you would really enjoy this area. As much as I loved saguaros, I had 6 of them in my yard in Tucson, but as time went on, they all kind of looked the same to me. So you gotta look for the small stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So here's I wanted to show a couple other flowers. This is one of the nicer of the non-unique plants of the region, Echinocerius fendleri. Beautiful flowers. It's a fairly common hedgehog. It covers quite a number of states, actually, in the Southwest. It's found in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and parts of southeastern Utah. And then yucca is always neat to see in nature when they flower. This was Yucca baccata. Lastly, give you a little bit list of some of the interesting places. This is just a smattering of all the places that you have access to, but these are more organized areas where you can find a parking lot and have trails instead of just bushwhacking like what I like to do. The Dragoon Mountains are a really gorgeous mountain range. This Apache Pass Road is a beautiful ride. And then you've got a wonderful museum, the Chiricahua Desert Museum, which is on the New Mexico side, but it's really close to Portal, Arizona. They have just a magnificent museum there, and some outdoor gardens. They've got a huge rattlesnake collection there as well, which is really fun. And I'll wind it up with a patented Arizona sunset. This was near Benson, Arizona. I do miss those Arizona sunsets.
Oh.
And that's it.
Thank you so much.
If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything. Comments, otherwise.